What a finish from Balogun.
Oh, Benyetta, beautifully done.
Aubameyang, surely. There it is.
Mbappé now. Wonderful. Gotta be. Lovely finish. He'll go for goal. Terry Mbappé.
It's Eli Wahi. Well, it's been coming.
Put in by Jonathan David. Kylian Mbappé brings the Parc des Princes to its feet.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast. We have another bumper episode for you today as we look back at all the action from week 13 where Paris Saint-Germain flexed their muscle against Monaco. Nice are proving they really are France's most Italian of towns with another 1-0 win to keep pace with the champions. Fabio Grosso says Lyon need a reality check, and Gennaro Gattuso says his Marseille side are Malachias. It was only going to be a matter of time. Baptiste Reynaud runs the rule over Rennes' season so far and the impact of returning coach Julien Stéphan. Jonathan Johnson tells us all about Montpellier's cult-figured captain Téji Savanier. And Andreas Evagora packs us into his very own time machine and takes us back to 2017 when a precocious young talent and an old tiger took Monaco to the Ligue 1 title. We also have the winner of our Déjà Who competition for last month and give you the chance to win a Rémy Cabella Lille jersey. We'll be looking ahead to We'll be looking ahead to a big week of European fixtures for the Ligue 1 clubs as well, and the next two rounds of Le Championnat. All of that with me, Robbie Thomson, Jonathan Johnson, and Andreas Evagora. Don't forget to find us on all your podcast platforms, to like, subscribe, follow, and recommend. Join the conversation on Twitter or X at Ligue1_ENG. And of course, you'll find all the latest news, reviews, interviews, video highlights, and everything on the League's official YouTube channel and Ligue1.com. So let's start with a review of all the action from round 13. It all started on Friday night when Paris Saint-Germain dismantled Monaco by 5-2. Monaco have this reputation as being PSG's bogey team. They are on occasion, but on occasion it comes royally unstuck, and that's exactly what happened at the Parc des Princes on Friday night. There were a couple of big goalkeeping mistakes early. One for each team. Donnaruma's particularly getting caught in possession, which made a game of it early on before Paris Saint-Germain just proved all too good in the second half. Andreas, Paris Saint-Germain, that's 6 wins in a row now. They haven't lost since Nice got that narrow victory over them. Are they really hitting their stride now? Did you like what we saw on Friday night?
Well, I certainly like what I saw. It was a really good game of football for the neutral, that's for sure. Plenty of goals, plenty of chances and saves, an open game. I think from an attacking point of view, PSG absolutely are hitting their stride. They at times were really good. They've got that attack that's got such pace and intensity. There was a lot of talk about Dembele ahead of the game and he's not scoring. He had a brilliant game. That goal of his was a thing of beauty, that first touch. Just to add a bit of maybe the other side of the coin, I think defensively PSG have some issues. I mean, some coaches say there's like two sorts of goals you can see. There's ones that are just football, you can't really do much about, and there's ones that are there because of maybe haven't done enough on the training pitch. And those 2 goals PSG conceded, I'm a little bit worried about them. Because, Donnarumma's footwork is better, not what it could be. Balogun's goal was, I don't think Hernandez's best position is at centre-back, I must say. Marquinhos was injured, and I think that's something they really have to look at. Hernandez, some of his tackling early on Balogun, there was one incident where he took Balogun's arm behind Balogun's back. He shoved with his right hand, he shoved his elbow into his back, and with the other he turned his wrists. I mean, it wasn't so much the dark arts as martial arts. So poor Balogun I thought he had a good game, but he did come on the end of a bit of stick. So to answer your question, I think attacking wise, that PSG scored 3 goals in, was it 5 games in a row now? They've added 5 to that.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, they've got to allow their opponents far fewer chances, especially with that Newcastle game coming up. But the team, I think, is gelling, and I think it's on the right path.
Well, let's talk about that Newcastle game coming up then, JJ, because PSG are leading the league. They're only just ahead of Nice, but this is a big match coming up for them in midweek in the Champions League, and they've really blown hot and cold so far in Europe this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully for them, they've blown more hot and cold at home at this moment in time, so they'll need another one of those impressive performances at Parc des Princes, like the ones that we saw against Dortmund and also Milan. I do agree with Andreas. I think defence is now starting to be a bit tricky for PSG. I think when they were allowing certain players to leave over the summer, they probably needed to know a little bit more about the extent of Nuno Mendes' injury before allowing Juan Bernat, for example, to move on. And you could say that they're probably one body light in terms of central defensive depth as well. You see at the moment without Marquinhos sort of what that means for Luis Enrique in terms of sort of rejigging that back line. And whichever way you slice it, whether you've got Mukiele potentially playing at left back, or as a makeshift central defender, it's not ideal. So, I think that we can expect to see Luis Enrique put PSG onto the front foot and try to exploit that attack, which is now starting to really find its feet and hit its stride. But I think the position that fascinates me the most coming into this Newcastle game, and it was really interesting to see against Monaco, was sort of how PSG fare in terms of the midfield. Now that Warren Zaire-Emery is out until the winter break, obviously a big blow over the international break. Fantastic to see him debut at senior level at such a young age, third youngest in France's history, but equally to lose him, for the next sort of month or so is a big blow for PSG because he's been a huge part of the way that they play so far this season. But Fabian Ruiz now has an opportunity to come into that midfield unit and prove to be the glue that PSG need in big games, not only against Newcastle, but also Dortmund away in the final round of Champions League group games. So I think that's going to be one that's really, really fascinating to watch. And, he put in a good performance against Monaco, I have to say. I think he is a very underrated player at times. I do think that there is plenty for Luis Enrique to ponder defensively, but in terms of the attack, they're looking pretty good, Nick. You look at how those predatory instincts have not really abandoned Gonzalo Ramos, despite the fact he hasn't been playing as much as he would have liked. Incidentally, just last week, PSG actioned that option that they had to buy Gonzalo Ramos outright from Benfica. So he is now settled and focused on his future. So, there's no two ways about it. It's a huge game for PSG coming up against Newcastle, and one that they really must take advantage of if they want to finish in the top two in this group.
Well, it really is the group of death for PSG in the Champions League. They currently sit second in that group behind Dortmund, Milan just a point behind. But realistically, any way you cut it up, Paris Saint-Germain could be top of that section after the game in midweek, or bottom of the section and facing the earliest exit from the Champions League proper since the Qataris took over the club. So that would be a big shock to the system and a real blow to everything that Luis Enrique is trying to do at the moment. Andreas, Nice are the only side, since Monaco have dropped off the rails now, Nice are the only side that can really seem to keep pace with them. Farioli is doing an amazing job. Defensively, they are so solid. I mean, the statistics are outrageous. 10 clean sheets, it's a European high. Just 4 goals conceded, it's a European low. In 13 matches, undefeated. I mean, are they really the archetypal Italian side? I mean, is this Inter from the 1960s all over again on the Côte d'Azur?
Yeah, you've got a good memory there, because I think it's been a while since Italian teams have been defensive and Catenaccio and all that. But you've got a close bond to Italian football, haven't you? So let's go with the cliche. Nice is very close to Italy as well, isn't it? Their defence is just... Who was it on the pod a couple of weeks ago saying, well, Nice can't go on winning every game 1-0. Well, they can, clearly. They've done it again. And after the match... Farioli was saying we put our heart and soul in defending. It's this great sort of, it's so important to them. It is, but look, defensively they're superb. Todibo, who wasn't playing at the weekend, has been sensational for me this season. They brought in Rosario, who just about did okay. I'm going to raise the flag for Melvin Bard, who I think he's one of the most underrated players out there. Is it because he's called Melvin, Robbie? He just doesn't have a footballer's name. He's an exceptional player.
Or the fact that he's trying to look like a bard now with his hair growing long and slicked back. He looks like some sort of Shakespearean tragicomic character.
Is it hard to sell for an agent when what's this guy's name? Melvin. But he's a really good left back. Terry Moffey, who again, Robbie, you nailed it, didn't you? At the start of the season, you said Terry Moffey could be a good buy, and he's proving to be exactly that. Another clean sheet. And if they keep going like this, why not? Second place is there for the taking. So I don't see any other team really. Monaco were impressive at the weekend, but I think certainly if Nice can keep defending like this, they've got an excellent team ethic. Why not? They can keep going and get in the top three, which would be a great performance for a first season in Ligue 1.
Well, it really is a two-horse race at the moment. Nice are the only side to have beaten PSG as well. I mean, they have played the top teams and got the results they needed as well. So I think we're all sort of thinking it's Paris Saint-Germain now because Nice won't be able to go the distance. But they're doing it. And I think one of the most incredible things about this hermetically sealed Nice defence is the fact that Danche, the captain, is 40 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, what other teams in Europe have the best defence in their league with a 40-year-old in the centre of defence? I mean, this is... I can't think of another team that's performing this well. I mean, Hilton was another Brazilian who played into his 40s and won the league with Montpellier, and I guess there is a parallel there as well with this old veteran player. But what Danche is achieving is absolutely sensational. He is a remarkable player at the moment. Next up, let's have a chat about what's happening at the other end of the table. JJ, Lille are closing in on Monaco in that fourth place, but rather than talk about Lille, because we know what they're doing and what they're doing well. They got their Canadian striker, Jonathan David, was on the score sheet for the first time in an age over the weekend as well. But the story out of this game, a 2-0 win over Lyon. Lyon unable to build on that first victory of the season. They are winless at home. It's just a disaster at the moment. And Fabio Grosso, the new coach, brought in to try and turn things around. Are his days numbered, JJ?
I think it's difficult to argue that they're not at this moment in time. I think some of what Grosso was saying after the game, after the defeat, is pretty worrying. He's basically saying that Lyon and Lyon fans have to forget what Lyon was as a club. There is no way that group of fans is going to like hearing that. Very proud of their history, very eager to get back to similar levels. And at this moment in time, the necessary form for that is just not forthcoming. And I think given the severity of the situation, given how listless Lyon have looked at times, there seem to be problems brewing as well with Lacazette now, obviously, star player in the past, not really able to help the team in the way that he would like on the pitch at this moment in time. It does feel like Grosso only has a limited number of games now left, to potentially save his skin, and you do wonder if sort of that game against Marseille, once it does get replayed, if that's going to have potentially a defining say on whether Grosso is coach of Lyon, sort of when we come back from the winter break, because it does feel like that's the next obvious point for Lyon to really consider the situation and work out if they're going to make a change ahead of the second half of the season. But I'd say that, given how long it took for Textor to make a decision, let's face it, a decision that we all knew was going to be made on Laurent Blanc's future. The odds are not favourable at this moment in time of that move or that decision being taken in time to salvage something from this season, because at this moment in time, Lyon, are Ligue 2 bound unless something massive, changes in and around the club. And I know that there are big sort of sweeping changes that are being made at this moment in time in terms of the hierarchy of the club. If that is enough to save, the club and the institution, we'll have to wait and see. But certainly in terms of what we're seeing on the pitch at this moment in time, it's not.
Yeah, I agree with with Jonathan. I crunched a few numbers this morning because, that's the thing I like to do on a Monday morning. I went back to the last time, Robbie, that Ligue 1 had 18 teams, and I just looked to see how many points you needed to stay up, which I thought was quite interesting. Let's say to be in 15th place. And in 2001, it was 38 points. 2002, it was 39 points. The two seasons were a bit different because 2 went down in one and 3 went down in the other. But you see what I'm getting at. So briefly, to get to that level, Lyon are going to need 31 points in 22 games. And I struggle to see them getting that much. I mean, Grosso,
it's a point and a half a game.
Exactly. He's
1.5 points a game, which means you've got to win more than you're drawing.
Exactly. And Grosso, as Jonathan alluded to, he doesn't seem to have an idea of his best team. He's picked 7 different teams for 7 matches. I think I read he's made 7 subs at half time, something like that. That shows he's chopping and changing, and he doesn't have time, Robbie. That's the thing. If this was right at the start of the season, maybe you could build the season, but he's running out of time. You're talking 22 games. And people say, well, this Lyon team's got too much quality to go down. Is it really? They lost so much over the summer with Gusto and Barcola and Lukeba and Auer, real quality players. I'm not sure if they have that quality, and the transfer window is going to be vital. But you could, if you're a real pessimist, who's going to want to come to Lyon at this stage? So it's a tough season for them.
There's no doubt alarm bells are ringing. I mean, by 15 minutes to go, I was watching the match live, and 15 minutes to go, the stadium is half empty. I mean, they're big indicators. And even up until probably midway through the second half, the Lyon fans were really, the ultras anyway, were really trying to stay behind their side. They were trying to get them back into the game. There were a couple of little half chances. The team did show a little bit of fight as though it could happen. But yeah, by the last 10 minutes or so, it didn't look good, and it doesn't look good. I think Fabio Grosso's right in terms of saying we need to have a reality check. That what he's saying is not to the fans, look, we're terrible now. What he's saying is sending a message to the players saying we are going to go down if something doesn't change now. I think he's trying to make the players responsible and up the urgency a little bit, saying, look, this whole club needs a reality check, because unless things change, we're going to go down. In Fabio Grosso's defense, and I put my hand up here, at the start of the season, we weren't allowed to pick Kylian Mbappé for the Golden Boot. And I, foolishly now with hindsight, went with Alexander Lacazette. So there you go. It shows that, it's not easy, even with the Lyon squad that they have. And some of us thought perhaps they would do a little better than they are doing. Lens warmed up for their clash with Arsenal with a 3-0 win in Clermont. So Clermont are also back to losing ways. Eli Wahi got a fantastic goal, a remarkable header. Followed that up with a red card. He does have a little bit of character, the France under-21 international. I'm a big fan. He's lightning quick. And the goals are going to flow for Lens. And I think it's only a matter of time before perhaps on the European stage he really starts to fire as well. Brest rolled on, a 3-1 win in Montpellier. They're up to 7th place. Metz got the edge in a 5-goal thriller in Lorient. Romain Fevre and 17-year-old sensation Elie Junior Krupi got the goals for Lorient, but it wasn't enough. Fantastic result for Metz. But the other big story we're going to stop on here, actually, before we get to Marseille, there was also a former Marseille man in Andre Ayew, made his return for the first time in 8 years to Ligue 1 football, and it lasted just 3 minutes before he was sent off for Le Havre. So welcome back, Andre, and cool your boots for another week or two, probably just 1 week for the challenge, in which I don't think it was really a malicious challenge, but it was definitely studs up. Not the return he was looking forward to, but Andre, we'll see you in another couple of weeks, hopefully before Christmas, to see how you're faring. But the big news, JJ, I'll come to you first on this one, because we spoke about it when Gennaro Gattuso arrived in French football. How was his character going to go? If ever there was a place for it, it was Marseille. But he doesn't seem to like the place, or not his players at any rate. He went the full this team is rubbish. I don't understand how they played in that second half. It was just a disaster. 1-1 with Strasbourg. Jonathan Klaus getting a goal against the side where he came through the youth ranks. But a remarkable situation where Gennaro Gattuso, I think in a little way, a little bit more aggressive, but in that Italian way, same as Fabio Grosso with the Gattuso diplomacy that we know so well, trying to just get the players to take responsibility for where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we're looking for some sort of method in the madness or the anger that we're talking about here on Gattuso's part, I think it's probably a calculated gamble in which he's trying to get the fans to sort of get on the players' back. Now, we know that sometimes that has a positive effect. Sometimes it can have a negative effect, certainly when Marseille are playing at home in front of a boiling Stade Velodrome crowd. But I think Gattuso feels at this moment in time that the players are probably going to be held more to account by the fans getting on their back than perhaps by what he's saying as the sort of new boss coming in, trying to instill these ideas. And, I think we'll have to see in the next couple of games if it has the desired impact. But I think if Gattuso is already sort of gambling and already sort of taking shots at his players, I think we're either going to come up to a point where the players totally buy into Gattuso's methods, or they totally don't buy in at all. And I think that's at the point where you can perhaps see things threatening to boil over in terms of the fan base.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the league table quickly before we look ahead to this week's European action. Paris Saint-Germain lead the way on 30 points, a point behind them Nice. Then come Monaco. There's already a 5-point gap now between the top two down to third place Monaco. Lille are closing up in fourth. Reims suffered defeat, but they are still there in fifth place. Lens are continuing their charge up the table. They're up to sixth now. Remember, Lens had a disastrous start to the campaign as well, but they're starting to find their form. Brest, Le Havre, a remarkable first return back in Ligue 1 in 15 years for Le Havre, who are there minus Andre Ayew as it is. Metz as well have managed to turn things around after a slow start. Rennes got back to winning ways under Julien Stéphan. That's a big result for them, and we're going to hear a lot more about Rennes later, so that's why we haven't spoken about their match against Reims. Nantes, Marseille have slipped to 12th now. Then comes Strasbourg, Montpellier, Toulouse are on a nervous slide down as well, as are Lorient in 16th place. The bottom two, though, who just can't take a trick at the moment, are still Clermont and Olympique Lyonnais. Olympique Lyonnais, we mentioned that match in hand they have against Marseille, but they are bottom of the table, 18th, with just 7 points from 12 matches so far. It is a very sorry state of affairs for them. You're listening to Jonathan Johnson, Andreas Evagora, and myself, Robbie Thomson, on Le Beau Jeu, the Ligue 1 Uber Eats official podcast. Okay, let's have a look ahead to then European football this week. We've already spoken about Paris Saint-Germain versus Newcastle. I think this is a match, well, that Paris Saint-Germain have to win, make no bones about it, but it will also be, as I suggested at the time in the wake of that terrible 4-1 drubbing at the hands of Newcastle in Northern England, that this is a chance for Paris Saint-Germain to get their revenge and perhaps just show Newcastle that a change of ownership doesn't mean it's all going to happen miraculously, and that especially in Europe, it takes a little bit of time. You have to earn your stripes. I'm saying all this, of course, in advance of the Champions League game at the Parc des Princes. But I think PSG will prove too strong for Newcastle in what could be the game that seals Newcastle's fate as well and sees them with no chance of progressing from the Champions League. Andreas, I want to come to you to chat about Arsenal v Lens. We've touched on Lens, Eli Wahi, and this side that are finding their form now. They're in third place in that group. Arsenal lead the way. Arsenal are all but in the next round already and can certainly book their place there with even just a draw against Lens. But do you think Lens can cause an upset?
I think they're capable of causing an upset. I mean, Arsenal will go through with a point. Lens, as we've discussed, on a really good run of form. Arsenal, strangely, are much better defensively away than at home. They're a little bit jittery at home, and they've got this goalkeeping issue that we don't need to go into too much, but it's causing a lot of friction in North London. So I think if Lens can go there, if they can play some quick attacking football, if they can get behind the Arsenal defence, why not? I think they're more than capable of doing it. But a draw might be acceptable for both sides. So it could end up with the honours even.
All right. Well, also coming up in Europe, and these are just the other matches coming up. Toulouse versus Union Saint-Gilloise. Toulouse, after their win over Liverpool last time out, if they can get the victory here over the Belgian side, they will be right in the hunt. Maccabi Haifa's game against Rennes has been moved to Budapest. It will not be played, obviously, in Israel, but they only found that out 3 days ago, where the game will be played at the Ferenc Puskás Arena. Marseille take on Ajax in a massive match for Gennaro Gattuso's side, and Lille can book their place in the next round of the conference when they travel to Olympia. JJ, on European football in general, not to look at these matches individually, but we know that France is enjoying a good season. Ligue 1 is enjoying a good season in Europe at the moment. The big five leagues could be not just an impression we have, but a reality at the end of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really approached crunch period sooner than many of us expected, I think, and we're sort of down now to a fraction of a point. And coming into these games, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we could see France overtake the Netherlands and get itself back into the top five in terms of the coefficient, which would be huge considering we're not even at the end of the group stage. Obviously, it's one thing getting back into the top five and then staying there, but based on the form that we've seen from the French team so far this season, it's been very encouraging. I mean, let's not forget as well, it could have been a bit better as well. Had Lens managed to get a result against PSV in the last round of games. But generally speaking, it's all been very positive so far. And if Marseille, if Gattuso can get that reaction out of his players, it will be perfect timing, because Marseille against Ajax directly, a French club against a Dutch club, could have all the impact in terms of that positioning. But it's been a tough last couple of years for French football on the continental scene. So to see Ligue 1 finally living up to the billing, is great. And hopefully, these teams can build on it and go on deeper runs so far this season. But it really would be a shame at this point to see any of them dropping out. I think everyone has had at least one sort of standout result so far in this European campaign. And fingers crossed we'll get a bit more of that. And then this week, sees France re-establish itself in the top five and stay there for the remainder of the season.
You may have noticed that we left Rennes out of our weekend roundup then. That's because we're going to take a closer look at the second Stéphan revolution at Roazhon Park. Julien Stéphan, the man back in charge for his second spell. He's back, and his players looked rejuvenated when they dismantled Reims by 3-1 on Sunday. Have they turned the corner? Could this be the start of the revival after poor old Pep Genesio was shown the door? They've been doing it on the continent, but your bread and butter is in the French Championship, and our undercover Frenchman in London, Baptiste Reynaud from The Classic Pod, has more on the revolution in Rennes.
With traditional powerhouses Marseille and Lyon struggling through their now usual seasonal craziness, and challengers Monaco, Lens and Lille at times struggling to find their rhythm, this season should have been one of opportunity for Stade Rennais, whose progress over the last 2 years, with consecutive fourth-place finishes under Bruno Pep Genesio, should have placed them in good stead for breaking into the top three. Whilst they'd lost Doku over the summer to Man City and he's tearing up the Premier League, Les Rouges et Noirs had been quietly optimistic as the season kicked off. Their coherent, seasons-long team building had brought in even more quality, with Enzo Lefebvre, Ludovic Blas, and Nemanja Matic, big names coming in. Rennes had looked ready to take the next step by pushing on for a Champions League spot, although question marks were already being raised as the season kicked off about Pep Genesio's ability to actually lead a team to real success over the long term. Alas, as the season kicked on, Rennes' inconsistencies of the last few seasons under Genesio had not abated. Defensive inexperience and frailties, especially at set pieces, continued to penalise them, whilst their potent Ligue 1 strike force, on paper at least, continued to disappoint, with Kalimuendo and Amin Gouiri, one of my favourites in particular, failing to kick on. With a disappointing 13th place after 12 games, pressure was starting to build up on Pep Genesio, whose previous Ligue 1 stop at Lyon had seen some similar inconsistencies and a similarly talented young side failing to deliver. The defeat on 12th of November to his old club, which by the way remains Lyon's only win of the season, had led Genesio and director of football Florian Maurice, also an ex-Lyon head, to discuss a way forward under the pressure they were facing. And despite announcing a desire to work through this and wait for a successful January transfer window to kick things on, Genesio then abruptly announced that he would leave the club. Scrambling for a successor, with a difficult game against Will Steele's Reims to prepare, Rennes announced on 19th of November that Genesio's predecessor, Julien Stéphan, would take over the club until at least the end of the season. This in turn led to internal chaos, with Florian Maurice allegedly threatening to resign due to the decision being taken without his involvement and allegedly being taken by owner and billionaire François Pinault before agreeing to stay. With chaos abating, the question now is whether Rennes have taken a step back by agreeing to the return of Stéphan. Now, as mentioned, there appeared to be a growing consensus at the start of the season that Genesio had perhaps taken the club as far as he could, with players' individual and collective performances seemingly hitting a glass ceiling, and question marks over his winning mentality, with accusation that he might prefer losing beautifully, as evidenced by the fact that Rennes played some of Ligue 1's best football of the last 2 seasons, as had Lyon under him previously, to winning ugly. Now, this is a very subjective concept, but one that has plagued Genesio in his managerial career so far. In that sense, seeing Genesio go was perhaps not such a surprise, as the results did not trend upwards after a third of the season in what is usually a difficult third season for managers. But choosing Stéphan, despite his undoubted qualities, does not come without a sense that this is a risky proposition. Stéphan was once clearly the up-and-coming star of French football, having taken Rennes to the promised land of winning a trophy by coming back from 2-0 down in the final of the Coupe de France against PSG, and to the Champions League spots. Stéphan had left Rennes abruptly, only to emerge at Strasbourg. After a wonderful first season there, his second season saw him be let go by Strasbourg, with the club in real danger of relegation. Stéphan is known as tactically astute, a real developer of young talent, as evidenced by the fact he built Rennes' academy into the shining light that it is now, helped by experienced heads and unknowns at the time, such as Franck Hez and Régis Lebris. And he's also part of France's footballing royalty, with his father Guy Stéphan being Didier Deschamps' assistant manager for France. But have Rennes proven ambitious enough with this choice when their exciting young talent may require a more experienced manager at the helm? For what it's worth, we're quite excited to see Stéphan's influence at a club that he knows well, and his first 10 days in charge have not disappointed. Stéphan handed the captaincy to experienced head Steve Mandanda after stalwart Benjamin Bourigeaud had struggled with the armband this season. He also set up Rennes in an exciting 3-4-3, which placed Benjamin Bourigeaud at right wing-back, where his crossing ability can be devastating, and from where he delivered a goal at the weekend, and allowed a front three of Terrier coming back from injury, Gouiri and Kalimuendo a lot of freedom. As importantly, Rennes' defense looked more assured, protected by Matic and with fewer gaps in the center. It's an encouraging start, so what can we expect from Rennes going forward? Well, in this chaotic season, they're still only 9 points behind third, and with plenty of talent at his disposal, Stéphan might lead them further back up the table, and Sunday might have marked the start of an exciting comeback for a club that objectively is structured for success.
Okay, so now it's time for our final episode of the Ligue 1 Legends series on the sides that have won Ligue 1 Uber Eats, the Hexagon trophy as it's known, in the 21st century. This time, Professor Andreas takes us back to 2016-17, when an emerging generational talent by the name Kylian Mbappé, I think it was, he helped Monaco upset Paris Saint-Germain's title dominance with a superb campaign under Leonardo Jardim, the Portuguese coach, the mastermind there. So let's head back to 2017 when Kiki, as he was known then, and maybe still is now to family and friends, created or got used to that penchant he has for winning trophies. He claimed his first silverware as a professional footballer then, alongside some amazingly good players. Over to you, Andreas.
Wednesday, the 3rd of July 2013, Stade Louis II. The sleepy Principality of Monaco is abuzz with excitement Not only are Monaco back in Ligue, but billionaire owner Dmitry Rybolovlev is splashing the cash like never before. Radamel Falcao and James Rodriguez are among the stars who've just transferred to the millionaire's playground. While the media are engrossed with the big-name signings, a 14-year-old kid from the northern suburbs of Paris is driven unnoticed into the stadium. Beyond the gaze of the press, Monaco are sealing arguably the most significant signing in the history of French football. The teenager's name is Kylian, and in 2017 he would inspire Monaco to the Ligue 1 title before becoming one of the biggest superstars in world sport. A precocious talent, Mbappé trained at France's famed Clairefontaine Academy, aged 11. From then, his career could have gone in many directions. Father Wilfred and mother Faiza wanted Kylian to get a good education and learn his trade in Ligue 1, so European giants were rejected, including Kylian's favourite club, Real Madrid. The Mbappé clan agreed to move to Lens and Caen, but on both occasions, the deal fell through because the clubs were relegated. That's when Monaco made their move. The clincher was when Kylian was told a place in the first team was his for the taking. November 2015, La Turbie training complex. 16-year-old Mbappé is training with the seniors for the first time. The impact is immediate. Mbappé didn't just burn the older pros for pace. This kid had the power of a player in his 20s, a first touch that bamboozled the most experienced defenders, and a finish to match. His debut came just weeks later against Caen, the club that so nearly signed him as a boy. Then in February, the moment the young Kylian had dreamed of for so long, the first goal in Ligue 1, a 3-1 win against Troyes, he became the club's youngest ever scorer, beating the record of a certain Thierry Henry. But if Kylian hoped to become a Monaco regular, he would be left disappointed. Coach Leonardo Jardim was cautious, and Mbappé made just 2 starts in the 15-16 campaign. Mbappé even dropped from the under-19s. Coaches frustrated with the player's lack of defensive contribution. Mbappé still had a lot to prove. Friday, the 12th of August 2016, fresh from winning the Euro under-19s, Mbappé forced his way into the first team for the opening match of the season. But disaster strikes. Just before half-time, Mbappé is left stunned after an aerial challenge with Guingamp defender Christophe Kerbrat. Father Wilfred is concerned as a concussed Mbappé is helped off the pitch by medical staff. Monaco are 2 down, but Mbappe's replacement, another talented youngster, Bernardo Silva, inspires a Monaco comeback. While Mbappé is sidelined, Monaco chalk up impressive wins against Nantes and PSG. Some start to ask, is this really the moment for Mbappé? The Mbappé clan was furious that the youngster was being sidelined. The truth was that Jardim had built a superb attacking outfit even without Mbappé. Youngsters Bernardo Silva, Fabinho, Thomas Lemar and Timoe Bakayoko thrived in Jardim's 4-4-2 formation. New signing Kamil Glik was a rock at the back. Up front, the inspired Falcao was undroppable, while Valery Germain and Guido Carrillo were proving more than able sidekicks. Matters came to a head in September when Mbappé was dropped from the squad that travelled to face Tottenham in the Champions League. A furious Mbappé refused to play in the UEFA Youth League. Father Wilfred was equally frustrated. We'll have to think about Kylian's future during the January transfer window, he tells L'Equipe. Silva and Lemar are outstanding. Monaco outplay Spurs. Then they beat Metz 7-0 away, leaving Mbappe's future at Monaco in doubt. Friday, the 21st of October 2016, Monaco back from a long Champions League trip to Moscow. Germain and Carrillo are in form but rested against Montpellier. Mbappé back and takes his chance with both hands. He's hungry and unplayable, winning an early penalty, heading in another before an assist in a 6-2 rout. Mbappé no longer the best kept secret in Ligue 1. The media were lauding the new golden boy of French football. Mbappé and Monaco went from strength to strength after that hammering of Montpellier. In February, Mbappé scored a hat-trick in less than 50 minutes in a 5-0 home drubbing of Metz. He won European recognition after a thrilling Champions League win against Manchester City. This exciting young Monaco team were taking France by storm, taking top spot on matchday 20 before winning 12 matches on the bounce to land a first title since the year 2000. Jardim's team was sensational, 107 goals, 95 points. They achieved what many thought was impossible, cracking PSG's dominance of French football. The league was won by 8 points. The title sealed with a victory against Saint-Etienne, Fittingly, Mbappé scoring the opening goal with a shimmy and cool finish that would become his trademark. 15 league goals in 16 starts, with 26 goals in all competitions for the teenager. As Mbappé lifted the Ligue 1 trophy, few doubted this would be the first of many honours for this generational player. What no one knew was that this would be Mbappe's finale at Monaco. That 16-17 season, a fleeting fusion of a magnificent Mbappé and Monaco.
Fantastic stuff, Andreas. Yes, what a team that was under Leonardo Jardim. There was also, and I'll just mention this quickly, a certain Valère Germain in that side who now plays his football here for MacArthur FC in Sydney's West. So not all of them went on to bigger and better things, but winning a Ligue 1 title certainly was a crowning moment in all those careers. And you look at the likes of Andrea Raggi, who came through the second division under Ranieri in that Monaco side. JJ, what are your memories of that Monaco season?
I think it was, hard to really not fall in love with that Monaco side at that moment in time. And it really felt like there was a very small window to truly enjoy that team, because everybody knows with the Monaco project, as it still is today, there was never really going to be any hope of keeping that squad together for too long. But I think probably, my fondest memory of sort of the Monaco of that time is the fantastic run that they had in Europe. We were talking earlier about the importance of having Ligue 1 clubs sort of living up to the billing on the European stage. And I fondly remember them making that run all the way to coming up against Juventus, sadly falling short. But it was, it really felt at that moment in time that Monaco really could be, a sort of long-term or at least a medium-term, title challenger to PSG. Obviously, we know what happened next. The squad got picked apart by a number of, European giants. But there were moments where it really felt as if, Monaco could be here to stay and sort of one of the teams that the PSG would have to work a lot harder to see off. And fingers crossed that Monaco do get themselves back to a similar stage to that at some point in the future. We know that they're sort of building towards a return to the Champions League at this moment in time, certainly regular European qualification. But I think those were extremely heady days when you look at some of the phenomenal talents that were on show and sort of where they went next after leaving the Principality.
You're listening to CBS-Viacom's French football expert, Jonathan Johnson. Don't forget, if you like what you're hearing, click subscribe on your podcast platform so that every 2 weeks, Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast, falls straight into your inbox. You'll hear the little ping on a Monday evening as you're ready to head home from work, or morning, depending on where you are around the world. And you can catch up with all the news and also the features that we have on the show this year, all about the French First Division Ligue 1. Well, now it's time for our sociopathic French football quiz, Déjà Who, which has you, the listeners, scrambling for cover from my bombardment of cryptic clues, scanning your French football memory database and hopefully identifying the player I am talking about. If you can do it, the reward is a Ligue 1 Uber Eats jersey, which for November was a Kevin Danzo RC Lens jersey. So it's time to announce the winner. But first, the answers to our 2 questions from November. They were Etienne Capoue was first, and the second one, a player who didn't spend that long in Ligue 1, but had a fairly glorious club career at any rate, missed out on the big prizes with his national team. Christian Panucci actually spent a season on loan from Inter, I think it was, first at Chelsea and then with Monaco, or 2 half seasons on loan at Monaco. The winner was Tom Keeling, our US listener, and long-time listeners of the pod will remember that Tom came on his honeymoon to France, and I actually caught up with him at the Parc des Princes. So I hope life is treating you well, Tom. He took time out from stuffing turkeys and limiting pumpkin pie consumption to send us the correct answer. Happy Thanksgiving all the same to you, Tom, and we'll be in touch to arrange the delivery of your prize. So now for our first December question, which could get you a Rémy Cabella Lille jersey. So there'll be another question in 2 weeks' time. If you think you know the answer to this, send us an email with the answer to league1podcast@gmail.com. Here it comes. Are you ready? Who am I? Hailing from the suburbs of Paris, I made my professional debut in the south of France, helping my club to the championship title before beginning an odyssey that would take me to another 4 different countries around the world. Over the course of my illustrious club career, I won Ligue 1, the English Premier League, La Liga, and the UEFA Champions League, as well as the World Cup and the Euro. A number of my individual records still stand to this day. My coaching career has so far failed to hit the heights of my playing days, but perhaps that could all change in the summer of 2024. So who am I? And what could I help my country win for the second time in history next year? These are often very difficult quizzes. I've taken pity on you all this week because I think this is quite a simple one. I assume most of you listening in have already got it. So we're expecting a lot of answers to the quiz this time. If you think you know it, league1podcast@gmail.com, and you could go into the running for a Rémy Cabella Lille jersey. Well, every now and again, you come across a player who does things on his own terms. Media spotlight? Nah. Big money moves? Nah. Scintillating on-ball talent, attitude, and an abiding love of the hometown? This is your man. We've been talking about none other than Montpellier's legendary playmaker, dead ball specialist, the man, the myth, the legend, Téji Savanier. Jonathan Johnson has more.
Montpellier might be playing catch-up on the rest of Ligue 1 given their game in hand against Clermont, which is to be replayed this week, but their talisman Téji Savanier is as key as ever to Michel Dezacarian's side. The 31-year-old schemer is back with his hometown club, having spent time with nearby Al Avignon and Nîmes Olympique, but there is deeper reasoning in why Savanier has never strayed too far from his family nest. My family comes before my career, revealed the gifted, deep-lying playmaker to RMC recently. The most important thing is to be good with my family. I could have received much more money playing for Milan, but I would have been unhappy. A player who is unhappy in life reflects that unhappiness on the pitch. I feel very good in Montpellier, where I'm at home. I still live with my family in our neighbourhood, and it's all I need. I do not need to go to a bigger club to feel good about myself or my life. It just makes no sense to me. Viewed in this context, Savanier's career starts to make much more sense. Lafayette's captain grew up in the Romani community on the outskirts of the city where his family is settled. The youth academy product with his beloved Montpellier, path to a starting 11 role and iconic status at Stade de la Mosson has not come easily. Savanier came through the Montpellier Youth Academy, which produced a golden generation with Younes Belhanda, Rémy Cabella, Jonas Martin, Abdelhamid El Kautari, and Benjamin Stambouli. And that side won the prestigious Gambardella Youth Cup in 2009 and would form a key part of the 2012 squad, which triumphed in Ligue 1 ahead of Qatar-backed PSG just 3 years later. Savanier was not part of either of those successes, though, missing out on the win over Nantes in the 2009 final. He was not offered professional terms and instead left for Al Avignon in Ligue 2, where he developed a reputation as being a set-piece expert, which Montpellier's rivals Nîmes recognised in 2015 when they moved for him. "I've worked on it since I was a child," said Savanier of his free-kick technique. "I have a way of hitting the ball that is a bit different, perhaps. It makes the ball dip heavily behind the defence. It's difficult to explain, but I try to hit the ball hard, somewhere around the instep, hitting through it so it creates minimal spin. My teammates know where it's going to go." Joining Nîmes brought Savanier back closer to his family, and it quickly brought strong form on the pitch, the debut season which ranked him as the team's top assist provider, as they improbably avoided relegation despite a substantial points deduction owing to a match-fixing scandal. It wasn't without its challenges, as Savanier had to ditch his fast-food diet, which he had grown accustomed to with Al Avignon, but it paid off in terms of performance, with 2 consecutive seasons leading the Ligue 2 assists chart as Nîmes made their way towards Ligue 1. Marco Verratti is no longer plying his trade in France with PSG, but there were parallels between the Italian pass master and Savanier, with both lighting up Le Championnat with their exquisite technique. I told him that he is really good and that he played very well, said Verratti after coming up against Savanier in Ligue. You can see that he understands football very well, plays the kind of football that I like. Everything he does has a purpose. He never looks to just get rid of the ball, he wants to play. He's a great player. During 4 years with Nîmes and an impressive first season in France's top flight, which ended in 9th place finish, Montpellier moved to bring Savanier home for a record at €10 million. This is where I feel most grounded, told L'Equipe of his emotional homecoming. Nothing can go wrong for me there. It's where I was born, and it's where I will die. We're among the gypsies, and we do our own thing. It's not something that you can really explain. We play pétanque in the afternoon, and the loser goes to the butcher to buy the meat for the barbecue. In the evening, we play guitar outdoors. And I don't think there are many footballers who are lucky enough to live this life, certainly not professionally. There is, however, another famous example to have hailed from France's gypsy communities. André Pierre Gignac is now a legend in Mexico with Tigres, but the prolific Frenchman was born in Martigues of partial Romani descent. He told SoFoot that he considers himself an adopted Manouche, a subgroup of Roma who have lived in France since the 18th century. In 2021, Savanier and Gignac teamed up to represent France at the Olympic Games in Japan as two of Les Bleus' 3 overage players. Although it was short-lived and ended with a group stage exit, it was fitting recognition for Savanier, who's not represented France at senior level, unlike Gignac. I'm just happy to find myself in such a position among such big names, said Savanier in 2019 when ranked just behind the likes of Verratti, Kylian Mbappé and Marquinhos by L'Equipe. I'm not thinking about that sort of thing when I'm playing football. I prefer to just enjoy myself. Savanier remains one of Ligue 1's most underrated talents and a delight to watch for purists everywhere. Long may that continue to be the case.
Thank you for that, JJ. Yeah, a fantastic figure, Téji Savanier. I love the Marco Verratti episode as well, because they really were similar style players, and talent recognizes talent, if you like. Another thing I loved about Téji Savanier was that Nîmes and Montpellier are bitter rivals. I think it's very rare that a player makes that 54k journey from one of those towns to the other. And the simple fact that the whole time he was playing at Nîmes, he stayed living in Montpellier, as though just the thumbing his nose to all the Nîmes fans who couldn't help but love him because he was their best player. But at the same time, clearly still loved his hometown Montpellier more than the arch rival. Andreas, what can you tell us about your love of Téji?
I do. I think he's a unique player, and he's like a maverick, isn't he? He's like those players in the 70s and 80s who does it on his own terms. When he came back to Montpellier, he was carrying a bit of timber, as we say. He lost 6 kilos, which I think has improved his game. But don't forget, he's turned down moves to Milan, to Sevilla, which is so unusual in this day and age. And you never know what you're going to get with him. I mean, he's got a short fuse, hasn't he? We've seen red cards, we've seen him, kick out and do some weird things. But when he's good, he is exceptionally good. And I suppose you could ask, why has he not played more for France? He played in the Olympic team, but just, part of a generation. I think if he'd have been any other country, he would have been a big player on the international stage. But a superb individual talent and an unpredictable one. I always enjoy watching him.
You're listening to Ligue 1 commentator Andreas Evagora, Jonathan Johnson as well, the French football expert, and myself, Robbie Thomson. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you'll find us at Ligue1_ENG on Twitter or X. And of course, there is Ligue1.com as well for all the latest news and videos and everything else you need to know to follow Le Championnat. Well, we're almost done, but we still have time just to look ahead to the next 2 weeks of action as we edge towards the Christmas break, which returns this year, of course, because last year's World Cup threw everything into a crazy spin. We even had various Boxing Days in France for the first time ever in football, but it's a return to normal. We've only got 18 clubs. We can afford to have a little Christmas break, which we will be having this year. But before then, rounds 14 and 15. JJ, we've got some big games coming up next weekend. Nice are on the road to Nantes. Le Havre entertain Paris Saint-Germain, and there are some connections there between the Le Havre backroom staff and the bosses running that club at the moment. Mathieu Bodmer, in particular, who grew up a Paris Saint-Germain fan and then played for the club after a long career playing for the likes of Lille and Monaco and elsewhere. Monaco take on Montpellier in a match that they have to win to right the ship as well. And Marseille, well, they need to bounce back against Rennes. What do you like from round 14, JJ?
There's so much to like. I mean, I think it's difficult to look past that Marseille-Rennes clash. But equally, I think Nantes-Nice could be quite interesting as well, because some unexpected teams have come unstuck against Nantes already this season, and that could be another test for this Nice side, because we've seen how great they can be defensively, but to get them, sort of scoring prolifically has still been a challenge for Farioli so far. So I think if I was to pick one of those, it would have to be Marseille versus Rennes, though. A lot to like. Julien Stéphan still trying to stamp his mark on this Rennes side, see if he can get them upwardly mobile and as quick a turnaround as possible. But this Marseille side, when we talked about it earlier, Gattuso really needs to get them not just performing well, but picking up the points as well. Where better to do that than in a big Ligue 1 clash in front of a full Stade Velodrome, you'd imagine.
There is also Lens versus Olympique Lyonnais, which, every other year you'd think was going to be a massive clash as well for European places. It could be a massive clash for both sides coming into that one as well. Reims take on Strasbourg, Toulouse, Lorient, and Brest versus Clermont as well coming up next weekend. And then, Andreas, in round 15, we've got Rennes versus Monaco, Paris Saint-Germain are at home to Nantes, Nice take on Reims, which is the match of the young coaches on the bench with Farioli and Still as well, and two sides that are trying to be archetypal modern football clubs, I think, moving forward, both with illustrious pasts as well, particularly a Reims club. Perhaps that's an idea for heading back in and looking ahead to the history of the game, Andreas, looking in weeks to come. Maybe some of the classic old French clubs like Stade de Reims, who made those Champions League finals back in the 1950s. Anyway, I digress. Lyon will be back in action against Toulouse, and Marseille are on the road to Lorient. Week 15, Andreas, take your pick.
Yeah, a couple of matches stand out. I think Marseille again. One thing that stood out from that Strasbourg match was that Marseille were just, not to put the two finer points on it, they were just exhausted at the end. They really didn't seem fit enough to me. And obviously the style has changed under Gattuso.
Well, that's one of the things that Gattuso said, wasn't it? One of the things Gattuso said, what's been going on here? And this club can't play. Yep. They can only play for 60 minutes.
And he wants a higher intensity style of football, doesn't he? So, it seems a strange thing to say in shortly December. Is he going to get his team fitter and fit enough to win games? I mean, Rennes and Lorient, Lorient is starting to scrap for their first division survival. They're going to be two tricky games. Lorient in a couple of weeks' time, and Lyon. We've got to go back to Lyon. I mean, they're going to have Toulouse at home. It's a relegation 6-pointer, Robbie. It's strange to say, but the pressure really is going to be on Lyon to win that game. So two really very important games for two of the biggest clubs in France.
Well, just before we let you go, I will raise an interesting point that I was thinking about this week. We hear coaches often talk about the number of matches that we're asking players to play these days, and club coaches are often pointing the finger towards national teams, because we've seen national team windows now are 3, even 4. I think it's going to be 4 matches next year, isn't it? Aren't they making a giant international window in September or October heading into moving forward? Anyway, there's a lot of football matches being played at the moment. We saw, I think it was Jules Koundé, the latest player to come out during the week, the French defender, and just saying, we're being asked to play so much. All the injuries, players are getting more and more serious injuries because of the intensity of these games. We know that Raphael Varane has spoken out about it as well. I think it's interesting that it's French players that take this stand, because we know France as a country is a very political country, and you stand up for what you believe in. You're not afraid to take a position in things you believe in. But I think it is curious that we see that French players are the ones that that are being public about this at this stage. And if you're looking at it from a negative point of view, people would say, "Oh, the French players, they don't know what it is to work hard and all this sort of thing." It's not. I think they're really saying, "Look, this is a dangerous period. We are footballers, and we are being asked to play at such so much that it's becoming dangerous." And I raise this because of what you just said, Andreas, about this Marseille side, not being able to keep going to finish matches. It's because nowadays, if you don't lay the foundations, if you're not physically, you can't take on a side which is physically at its absolute prime. And modern football now, you can have a team like Reims, who don't have any big star players, but are very well oiled. They have players that are fit, that play a high pressing game, that will give absolutely everything, work themselves into the ground. And if you're not quite 100% fit, or you have an older mentality of we'll play football a certain way, it won't stand up to the rigors of the modern game. You have to be 100% fit. And JJ, I'll just ask you your thoughts on this issue, because I think there's a feeling in football now that the players, they're complaining. People don't understand the intensity with which football is played at now. It is nothing to do with even 15 years ago, let alone when you look back to the 1990s, when goalkeepers were still allowed to pick up the ball with their hands from a back pass. I mean, all the rules have been changed so that the game flows and is intense, and it is brutal on the players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, it's quite telling when you've got somebody as young as Jules Koundé, coming out and basically pointing out exactly the same thing just recently over the international break. It's very, very difficult to make an argument for, increasing what is already a very, very heavy schedule in terms of matches played that we expect the players to be fit for. Yet it seems to be the only ideas that people have in terms of innovating. The sport seem to be adding to this ridiculous calendar instead of sort of trimming the fat in certain places. And it is reaching a moment now, I think, where you're seeing this explosion of ACL injuries, for example, where, at some point there is going to be a tipping point, I think, because at the moment the players, especially the younger players, are just getting absolutely run into the ground. And I think perhaps, really unfortunately, I don't like to sort of, be the sort of the bearer of sort of bad news or a bad omen, but it does feel like, unless there was potentially some sort of spate of maybe career-ending injuries, that people will actually sort of wake up to the fact that the schedule is too demanding at this moment in time, and it's detrimental not just to the current players, but for players who are coming into the game, and hoping to make a career of it in the future.
Andreas, you grew up watching football in England in the 80s, when teams only made one substitution, perhaps, in a game. Players played 40 matches in a season, played the entire season, never got injured, drank 10 pints after the game. I mean, it was a different time when the legends of football were written. It was almost a different sport.
It was. I mean, to use an example from the team I grew up supporting, Arsenal in 1980, Arsenal played 42 games. They got to the final of the Cup Winners' Cup. They got to the final of the FA Cup. They played 4 replays of one FA Cup tie. I think they played more than, 70 matches. Anyway, it was with 15 players. Look, there's two sides of the ledger. One is, in those days, the pitches were terrible. The tackles were X-rated. But if you look at it, as you were alluding to, Robbie, it was slow. Players had time on the ball, back to the goalkeeper. It was not at all the pace and intensity that we have today. In addition to that intensity, one thing that players and coaches talk about is the traveling. Now, people say, oh, they're traveling business class. And yeah, they are. But it's a time difference. Look at Marquinhos, right? He came back injured. He would have arrived back in Paris Thursday morning, our time. He would have gone to bed about 1 o'clock local time. That's about 6 a.m. Now, he's a young kid. Yeah, he can go to bed at 6 a.m. But are you going to be at that top level, basically having not slept tonight? No. So it is a very important issue. The game is more physical, it's faster, it's quicker, and the traveling, time zones, they all take their toll. And it's going to be an important issue and a growing one, because as Jonathan says, all federations seem to do is just add more. There's so many more competitions now, longer competitions, Nations League, and you could say hats off to Ligue 1 for reducing the workload on French players by going from 22 to 18 teams. But apart from that, it's just more and more matches.
And the World Cup is going to be 48 teams in 2 years' time as well. Well, 3 years' time. One to look forward to all the same. Let's not argue about the World Cup getting bigger and better. You're listening to Andreas Evagora, Jonathan Johnson, myself, Robbie Thomson, Twitter at Ligue1_ENG. We're here with the official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast, Le Beau Jeu, on all your favorite platforms. Like, subscribe, follow, and recommend. And of course, get on and check out all the latest news on Ligue1.com. That is it for us. Le Beau Jeu will be back in 2 weeks' time to look back at rounds 14 and 15, as well as all the European action. And we'll even have a look ahead to rounds 16 and 17, because that's right, we're almost halfway through the season. There'll also be another chance for you to win a Rémy Cabella Lille jersey in the Déjà Who competition. And we'll be conducting our regular features, player profiles, and interviews, and all the rest. So until then, on behalf of the entire Le Beau Jeu team, have a great week. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Ellie White. Well, it's been coming.